Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. We've been covering a lot of news out from IREN, Cypher, Bitfarms, Riot lately, but we wanted to take today's video and profile a few of the miners that we haven't talked about as recently on the channel, including DMG, Hive, Mara, and of course, Core Scientific. Some interesting takes here, data analysis we wanted to talk about in today's video. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below if you're holding any of these miners and how you're feeling about the sector overall. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, away we go. Monday afternoon, the start of another trading week, looking quite optimistic for both Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. That's where we're going to be starting today. Bitcoin slowly creeping up in the neighborhood of about $114,000 this morning. A lot of people have been quoting October as a big time potentially for Bitcoin to start taking off. Q4 we've talked about extensively as historically during that 4-year cycle, really where we see a lot of torque in terms of the Bitcoin price. So maybe we'll kick off there, starting to look a little more optimistic or rosy for Bitcoin itself.
Yeah, absolutely. A nice increase. Sort of started late yesterday, actually, in UK time, and it's continued that this morning, and already breached 114,000 today, which is far nice position than it was on Friday when we were down in the 108, 109,000 range. So very optimistic to start the week.
The nice thing about this lift in Bitcoin price, many of the miners now are at least selling enough production to cover operating costs, if not all of their monthly production. So this is directly heading into that top line revenue and really bootstrapping a lot of the AI development we talk about. Now, in terms of the miners themselves, they're receiving a lot of benefit, not only from Bitcoin price moving, but this AI HPC re-rate we've talked about consistently over the last few months on the channel. You can see across the board here some big moves and some interesting names on top of the list today. DMG taking first place Monday morning.
Yeah, a nice rise there, nearly 16% up, and not had as much profile over the last few months as some of the other miners there, but certainly a big rise today. And we'll cover DMG in a little bit more later in the podcast because we've listened to the likes of Sheldon Bennett and Steve, the Chief Operating Officer. They talk a lot about the things that they're doing there, and we're going to explain a little bit more on that. And maybe some of these companies, that we discussed today, are probably getting a little bit overlooked with the certain Cypher and IREN mania that we've witnessed over the last 2 to 3 weeks.
I was going to say the elephant in the room, Cypher IREN is all over social media, but if you look down this list, DMG, Mara, Hive, there's some strong contenders that maybe aren't getting the same amount of radio time right now. So we're going to be dedicating today's episode talking about some of the unique strategy approach that these companies really bring to both Bitcoin mining and HPC AI potential. Before we do though, we did want to jump into the Hashrate index. This not looking so rosy for the miners. Hash price now below $50 per petahash per day. We've got another difficulty adjustment coming up this week. And in terms of global network difficulty, again, pushing the upper envelope here.
Yeah, that network global hash rate that you just mentioned there is looks like it's constantly now above the 1,000 exahash there, and on a 7-day average, 1,057. So quite close to its all-time high. Difficulty has been a problem we've highlighted on the podcast for the last 20 months. And more so since the halving last year in April. Remember, the halving reduces rewards to each miner by 50% every 4 years. So every day at the moment, you can see the miners around the world are rewarded with 450 Bitcoin per day. And in April 2028, that goes down to 225 Bitcoin. Now, everybody forgets the difficulty, which is as more machines go onto the network, the difficulty needs to become harder, because when you've got more machines searching the algorithm for that next block, it becomes easy when you have more machines. At the moment, if we look at where we are at the moment, the average time taken to achieve the next block is 9 minutes 30. Well, it's supposed to take 10 minutes. So this difficulty of 5.23% that will occur at the moment on October the 1st or Wednesday this week will bring that back down to 10 minutes per block. So they'll make it harder. And at the same time, that 5% increase will reduce productivity by those miners on the network. So 5% reduction, in a 2 week period, when we've just said over a 4 year period, there's a one-off 50%. The difficulty is something that miners really do care about. And it does affect not only their production, but their mining margins and inevitably bottom line, to help them grow as companies.
Yeah, now we've talked a lot about these miners transitioning out of Bitcoin mining. This is really one of the key reasons, not to mention the halving. This is concerning for me for two reasons, really. Number one, obviously the difficulty, the impact on their revenue and the number of Bitcoin that are won. But secondly, a lot of the pubcos have now come out and publicly stated they're not going to be growing exahash. So this leads us to believe these are either private companies or potentially individuals, governments, nation states. We've heard a lot now about nation states around the world quietly getting into the Bitcoin mining game. We know the Trump family has more publicly got involved with ABTC. What is your take on this, Anthony? The global hash rate continuing to rise, perhaps maybe slower than the rate we've seen in the past, but where is this hash rate coming from?
This hash rate will be coming from places where the power is, literally very, very cheap or actually, zero. So there might be cases around the world where there is stranded power and the ability to plug into that and maybe not use the most efficient miners, but still plug into that with older miners that could be purchased far cheaper prices than the latest models and growing that hash rate there, but adding to the global hash rate. We haven't seen, apart from the likes of Bitdeer and Hive Digital, who've really been growing hash rate quite significantly in recent months. Most of the miners, as you quite rightly say, have started to focus on delivering their power towards a HPC strategy because they've looked at the fact that even in the last 2 years, you look at the last 8 quarters. Not many miners are making a profit. In fact, if a miner has managed to achieve 2 quarters of profit in the last 8, that's been, in a sense, been fairly good. I mean, IREN have bucked the trend a little bit, but with IREN, you've got a miner there that's managed to tap into the cheapest power in North America, in Texas, around about the 3 to 3.5 cents, 3.5 cents on a bad month, sub 3 cents on a good month, and they're using predominantly market rates to achieve that. But they've also got this efficiency of mining machines. They've got the most efficient fleet of anyone pretty much around the world. And when you've got those two parts to it, it means that you're able to achieve, a reasonable margin. They've shown that they don't have any hodl. They don't benefit from FASB rules, but they've managed to achieve now 3 consecutive quarterly updates where they've provided a net income in all three. And that's something that none of the other miners can actually show there. Yes, we're seeing miners get a profit using the FASB rules, but if we strip out FASB, then, literally every miner made a loss in the last quarter except IREN. And that's the challenge you've got. If you're not making profit now, what are you going to be making after the next halving? And we haven't got to the next halving. That's still, probably close to 2.5 years, just slightly more than 2.5 years away. And this difficulty, although it's not as risen as high as it was in the early part of 2024 through 2025, it's still rising. It's still getting above that. It's close to that 1100 exahash on the 7-day moving average. And will we see in the next, say, 2, 4, 6 weeks, it achieve that status there and keep going? I think, retail investors need to keep a watchful eye on difficulty and understand the implications it has towards Bitcoin mining and their production, their margins, their profits, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's a good point. I definitely concur there. And you can see again on the Luxor website a nice heat map or global distribution of where hash rate's coming on. But this is concerning for me, as you say, these are people that are plugging in with zero cost or very low cost power. It's almost impossible to compete with that as a public company, at least in North America at this point in time. So, with that being said, now we wanted to explore some of the innovative or kind of differentiated approaches that DMG, Hive, Mar are taking. Then we're going to talk about Core Scientific and an update on that deal with CoreWeave. The first one we wanted to talk about, DMG Blockchain. Now, they're based in Canada here in British Columbia, just one province over from myself. If you go over to their website, you can see some great images of this Christina Lake facility. It's a 65 megawatt facility. They've got their own substation, and DMG in terms of leadership and experience in the space, really second to none.
Yeah, I mean, they're not the largest Bitcoin miner out there, but they are probably the miner with the longest serving CEO. Sheldon Bennett built this company from ground up. I mean, he's previously worked with Bitfury. He's worked with a number of miners in terms of providing guidance on how to build sites, how to build infrastructure. That he had his finger in so many different pies. He's one of the OGs in the space and probably doesn't get enough recognition for the fact he's been there longer than anybody that we've talked to on the channel in terms of mining industry. Now, the 65 megawatt site at Christina Lake there, you can see that from the pictures there. That at the moment is fully utilized to delivering, its hash rate, and they're hoping to get to 3 exahash by the end of the year. But in these last few quarters, we've interviewed Sheldon and Steve, and they've been more and more now looking to diversify some of that power, like many of their peer miners, towards delivering high performance compute.
You're quite right there. So, as a quick education piece on DMG, they've got their core division, which is the Bitcoin mining data center operations. Then they've got Core Plus. And if you look through this list, whether it's TerraPool, Petra, the Wallet Score, Blockseer, there's so many components here that really demonstrate that expertise you've talked about. So, it's important to understand this ecosystem to really picture the entire DMG story. Now, on the HPC side of things, you're quite right there, Anthony. They've got really two key competitive advantages in my mind. Number one, they've got a partnership with an Indigenous band in British Columbia by the name of the Malahat Nation. This offers a host of benefits to DMG. We'll talk about some of the tax benefits, but there's been a real push in Canada for data sovereignty, specifically among government and Indigenous groups. So whether you're talking about citizen information, fisheries, forestry data, there's a ton of information that's sensitive to Canada that they want to keep within our borders. Now, this partnership is the first component. The other, DMG has also gone through the procurement process to acquire up to 10 megawatts of prefabricated SCIF rated, which means US military grade prefabricated data centers. So to date, they've purchased two of these. The goal is eventually to build out 15 megawatts on the Christina Lake location, 15 megawatts on the Malahat location for a total of 30 megawatts critical IT load. But this really represents a huge opportunity here in Canada and for DMG blockchain.
Yeah, and it's going to, hopefully enable them to, have some great partnerships. And they've talked about these partnerships, the fact that, access to capital, access to customers, looking to maintain this blueprint for Canada. And also the fact, the social responsibility, we don't talk enough about that. DMG, along with, all the other miners there, do act really, in a social responsible way. They employ people from the local areas. They probably help local organizations. And we've covered many of these examples from the likes of Hive and IREN, who do so much themselves in the local areas. Mara heating, I think it was 11,000 homes in Scandinavia. Hive heating or providing power to schools in Paraguay, and DMG exactly the same. A lot of this good standing in the community there, and being a responsible, responsible company. And again, this is highlighted.
Now, the other angle here, you and I ran into DMG in New York at the H.C. Wainwright conference. We were talking to them about this focus on government/military contracts. They mentioned to maybe take another read through the August production report. So if you take a look towards the end of this press release, they specifically say August was an active time for our focus on our new business initiatives, particularly selling our artificial intelligence or AI infrastructure to the Canadian defense sector. So very specific wording, something we haven't heard a lot from any of the other Bitcoin miners at this point. Now, they did mention the sales cycle or sales funnel process with government entities can take a little bit longer, but if you're able to lock down those contracts, they're recurring, you've got your foot in the door, and they generally lead to a lot of growth or expansion potential. So DMG, again, a lesser known miner, based here in Canada that you may want to take a look at, up 16% today. I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's also some tax benefits. If you take a look at the Government of Canada or CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency tax website, if you look under the Indigenous taxable benefit portion of the website, you can see not only are taxes, GST and PST exempt on products and purchases. So imagine if they're running a lot of the infrastructure purchases through the Malahat, but also operations that are based on Indigenous land, regardless of the corporation type, exempt from a lot of the taxes you'll see maybe in other areas of the country as well. So again, DMG, some unique cards up their sleeve, and one that maybe you haven't taken a look at in depth prior.
That's great, Bryce, and it's great to highlight a company that's probably getting closer to utilizing its HP strategy than some of those miners that are getting sort of like top press announcements on a day-by-day basis at the moment.
Yeah, and I like the fact that we do cover some smaller companies too. Soluna's already been in the limelight, but DMG, another up and comer, I think maybe soon to having its time here. Now, another one, a Canadian link here. Hive Digital Technologies, their subsidiary Buzz HPC. There's a lot going on at this organization as well. Before we get into the AI component, I wanted to dust off or refresh the last press release that came out talking about this 20 exahash milestone. Now, I've highlighted two specific lines. You can essentially see where they're at now, about 9 Bitcoin per day, and where they want to be by Thanksgiving, US Thanksgiving, around 12 Bitcoin per day. So earlier in the conversation, Anthony, you mentioned the fact that there's only a handful of miners that are growing the self-mining component of the business. Hive is really first in class in 2025.
Yeah, this year's been a phenomenal year for Hive. They've started the year at probably just over 6 exahash. They're already at 20 exahash in September, and by Thanksgiving, they're going to grow to a total of 25 exahash with an efficiency of 17.5 joules a terahash. And that puts them in that sort of like that top three in terms of miners with the most efficient fleet. Their power costs in Paraguay are significantly lower than elsewhere in different continents where they're currently providing, although they have recently received some good positive news in Sweden about the tax rates associated with data centers. That looks like it might be coming down, making the power a little bit cheaper there. But I believe at the moment, Paraguay, the sort of circa 4 to 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour is probably cheaper than they're providing elsewhere. And that brings their blended power costs down. And when you've got an efficiency as low as they have and that low power cost there, that's going to give them some really good margins. And producing 12 Bitcoin, well, we hope it's close to 12 Bitcoin. We've just been talking about the difficulty that could impact there. But as close as to 12 as you can probably get, come Thanksgiving, that will give them some real revenues coming through and some great margins as they reduce that efficiency continuously.
Yeah, it certainly will. And it also gives them some cash flow to help support the HPC growth as well. So Buzz HPC, I mentioned the Canadian connection there, just acquired or finalized that 7.2 megawatt Tier 3 data center in Toronto. Now, Toronto is known in Canada and really around the world as being a hub for AI or artificial intelligence, education, a university's knowledge base. So in terms of staffing and ability to recruit or hire in this location, a great opportunity there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at Hive. We talked about other miners being in the HPC space like Bit Digital and IREN, but Hive have been there just as long as anybody. I mean, remember they were an Ethereum miner with about 40,000 GPUs, and when that stopped back in September 2022, they had to start thinking about the use model for those GPUs, and it was a natural progression to move into the high performance compute space. Now it's been, a sort of a slow challenge for them to get into there. They've bought some more efficient GPUs, the H100s, and they've now moved on to even more and more efficient machines as they deliver that HPC strategy that we know they can. The last time we spoke to Aidan and Frank, they're already at the 20 million of annualized revenue. So bear in mind, not too far behind where IREN are, and IREN have been adding quite a lot of GPUs in recent months to their fleet. So Hive at 20 million. The expectation is that they're going to grow to, to 100 million by the end of 2026. That's a 5x. That's the sort of growth they've had this year in the Bitcoin mining, and they've achieved the Bitcoin mining every target they put out there. So I believe it's probably likely they're going to get them targets in place and grow their strategy for HPC. And this T3 data center that I just purchased there, that is just another way of getting closer and closer. I've been very fortunate to have actually visited one of their data center sites in Boden in northern Sweden back in October, and was really privileged to see the facility there. Now, in that facility, like a facility that we've highlighted, one of IREN's facilities in Prince George, had GPUs and the Bitmain S21 XP mining machines in the same facility. So, where we've heard before, miners looking to maybe differentiate by having separate facilities for mining, separate facilities for HPC, there's clearly a couple of companies here that have managed to utilize a strategy of incorporating both types of machines into the one facility and working, in tandem with each other. So, it's great. The final thing to say is with regards to HPC and AI, Hive have NVIDIA Cloud Partner status. And Bryce, if you'd like to go through and talk a bit more about what that means to Hive itself.
Yeah, you're certainly right there. So NVIDIA Cloud Partner, not to be confused with NVIDIA Preferred Partner. This is essentially a program for providers of hosted AI and HP services, which offers a reference architecture for deploying NVIDIA-powered infrastructure. Now, you'll see on Hive's slide, they've already operated over 5,000 NVIDIA GPUs. On the Buzz HPC website, you can see a variety of different models there, ranging through the Hopper spectrum. You just mentioned operating the H100s. They now also have the H200s, which are significantly less energy than maybe the B200 model, but a large improvement or upgrade from the H100. So this really leads into that discussion we've been having, Anthony, about the shelf life or longevity of these various different GPU units. But as you can see here, still strong demand, and with exponential AI growth over the next few decades, I don't think we're going to have any shortage or issue filling GPU hours.
No, and you're quite right. I mean, these, the H200s have a lower power consumption when compared to the B200s, and also a lot more companies out there have been using the H100s, which, when you think about it, IREN and Hive started using those, no, not even 2 years ago. And so a lot of those companies now using the H100s will look to transition from those into the H200s. And Hive have got that sort of nice transition period there where they can provide those services now to those companies looking to utilize that next level machine.
Very excited to see that growth story continue. And Hive's another one that I've been watching closely in terms of share price over the last few sessions. Basically, every one of these exahash announcements, you can see the share price march up. The other company we've been watching closely, really the leader for a long time in the Bitcoin mining space, Mara, they've been dethroned now in terms of market cap by IREN. But if you look across their portfolio, This is one of the largest, most vertically integrated global players in the Bitcoin mining space. They've already signaled that they're starting to get involved in HPC AI, albeit maybe in a little bit of a unique way compared to some of the other miners. But this is another one to keep an eye on in terms of their partnerships and their strategy shift, including now owned and operated energy facilities or wind farms.
Yeah, and Mara, we might look at IREN having the biggest market capitalization of all the miners, but when we're looking at the size of mining fleets and the actual hash rate online, at the moment, Mara is the largest, and still continuing to grow hash rate. I think they've got a target of about 75 exahashes, the next target there. You look at CleanSpark, they've got a target of about 60. So for the foreseeable future, we can see Mara being the biggest, maybe the likes of Bitdeer when, we talk to them about building their own machines and use them across all their sites. They've got some massive sites around the world. Maybe they get above 70 in the future, but at the moment, Mara's the biggest one there. 1.7 gigawatts of flexible compute capacity there. And we like it when he said it's flexible compute capacity because what they're really saying there is potentially we can use it for anything. But we've had them on the chat on the podcast, and they really talked about the Bitcoin mining, talked about the fact they've now got this wind farm there that they've purchased there. They want to move in a way of continuing Bitcoin mining, maybe working alongside some of the big data center companies there, and maybe using their expertise to help balance the energy grid and use that capacity when it's not being used by data centers to mine Bitcoin at a very, very cheap price, because that's one way of reducing the price there. If you can tap into power when it's not being utilized, that might be able to get it at a cheaper rate and enable a reasonably good margin, because even when we talk about the 4.5, 5 cents, 6 cents price of energy, in 2 years' time, that's not going to be enough to make a margin. No matter what machines you're using out there, it's going to be really challenging when the Bitcoin halving occurs, especially as this difficulty seems to be going up every fortnight. Every time we talk about the difficulty, it seems to go in one direction. But I do like the fact that Mara, they really sort of like pick certain types of business strategies to move into. I mean, I was quite impressed when they managed to sign a deal for a joint venture in Abu Dhabi, which is probably the last place on earth that you'd ever expect a Bitcoin mining company to operate. But when you listen to Fred Thiel and explain, how that was going to work out there, it really sort of like, yes, it's obvious to the uneducated. And you think about these countries in the Middle East there, they require a significant amount of power just to manage during the day, in terms of the fact that they need to have lots and lots of air conditioning. The temperature in the middle of the year, in the warmer months, gets above 50 degrees centigrade. And I've been to Dubai and Abu Dhabi many occasions there, and I don't try to go in those, that July and August months. I've been in October, and walking out the airport, it's like walking into an oven. 44 degrees, it's October, you want that air conditioning. Well, that's great. So the weather during the day is really, really hot, but during the evening, it really sort of like drops, and there's not as much requirement for air conditioning. And Amara realized this, and they've tied in with a partnership over there to deliver, Bitcoin mining, and they have a 20% joint venture in Abu Dhabi, and it's working really well. And that's just an example of what, they go out there and look outside the box. They've also looked to move into Africa as well. They're one of the first mining companies to look at Ethiopia and sites down there. And so, they don't just stop and look at the American model. They've also now, as we've talked many times in the podcast, looked to grow their own and build their own sites and purchase their own sites. They've realized that the asset-light model worked during a period when rewards were higher. So get as much money from machines as you can, invest in machines. But now that those rewards have dropped, you really need to have control over your power costs, control over your machines as well. And now I think they own getting closer towards 70% of all their infrastructure. And they've got a target in the next 2 years to get that to 100%. Now, Bryce, I mean, you can talk more about some of the other types of partnerships that they've looked at in the past sort of like couple of quarters.
Yeah, I was going to say, not only are they innovative on where they're going to mine Bitcoin, but also on some of these key strategic partnerships. Two we wanted to double click on today, Tay Power. So this is really about load management. You can see a system dedicated to high frequency, real-time responsive load management. They've actually come out with a prototype, or expected to have that by late summer this year, for full commercial deployment expected in 2026. So that could be a potential catalyst for Mara. There's a lot of companies that are using a lot of power and really maybe don't fully optimize the data or load within their system. The other one we've talked about is load balancing, or essentially acting as a power sink. So partnering up with some of these companies and using the Bitcoin mining to offset maybe when there's not a full draw on the power. So this one, as the name implies, develop a power load balancing as a service, leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to orchestrate this grid service capability. So again, very innovative, cutting edge, and something a lot of the other miners really aren't talking about at this point. Now, with that being said, it does lead me to my next question for you, Anthony. Similar to what we've seen with DMG, the market understands there's a lot going on at these companies, but in the case of Mara, based on one of the recent polls you just ran, it seems the retail investor base having a little bit of trouble really defining what this company's true strategy is.
Yeah, and I don't just think it's the retail investor base either. I think a lot of institutional investors probably, would be hard pushed to define, what Mara's, current business is really, because they're doing so many different things. One thing that Salman said they weren't is a treasury management company, and yet, they talk about how they're going to, not just hold Bitcoin, but actually put it to work. And they've even partnered with a company called 2Prime, who we've talked about with the likes of CleanSpark, and they've expanded that partnership with 2Prime through a minority investment, allocated 2,000 Bitcoin to their asset management platform to try and derive a return from that there. So again, not a treasury management company, but doing a lot of things that a treasury management company will look to do, holding a significant amount of Bitcoin. And remember, not many companies, only one public company holds more Bitcoin than Mara, and that's strategy itself. And in terms of the poll itself, we had over 316 votes there. 34.8% suggested Bitcoin mining company, which I think is probably the right answer in terms of the fact is they are a Bitcoin mining company with over 300,000 machines, with the highest hash rate of all the public miners in North America. 20%, even though the CFO for Mara said we're not a treasury management company, believe they are a treasury management company. We had a further 10% suggesting an investment holding company, and then as many people who thought they were a Bitcoin mining company have suggested something else, or they don't really know. And so this is the issue we have with the likes of Mara in terms of that communication, understanding what the company is, and maybe we're going to get some some of the key people from the company onto the podcast to sort of like start talking about some of these initiatives and building that picture up to determine what their real business model is, so everyone can understand it. And then if they want to, look more, they can do their own due diligence to determine whether they want to purchase shares in the company.
Yeah, one thing I've learned over my time in this space in the last 24 months, transparency and simplicity are key for investor messaging. We just saw that with Bit Digital, basically stripping down everything in their company to two line items, their Ethereum hodl and their interest in white fiber. But I think the simplicity really does bode well for these companies. And again, some great insights into Mara's strategy. One thing we haven't really talked about specifically, we know there's some interest in HPC AI, but have they looked or talked specifically about operating GPUs like these other miners have?
Yeah, I mean they've put out this update recently about a recent investment agreement with Exeon. Now Exeon are part of a large European energy company, EDF, and this is going to put them primarily focused in the AI, HPC, cybersecurity, and blockchain areas. Now, one thing that you can say about Mar is they obviously do keep their eye. Fred's a tech guy. He's got over 40 years experience in the technology industry. He will have seen what's happening around there, and he will know that there is a sort of like how do we say, an inevitability for mining companies with significant amounts of power to start looking at how they direct some of that power. And maybe this investment now can start that process to get their understanding of how they're going to deliver this, and then maybe utilize that strategy not just in Europe, but maybe in other continents like North America.
Most definitely. Now, the last piece we wanted to leave you with today, we did get an update from Core Scientific on the date for the merger acquisition proposal with CoreWeave. October 30th, so just before Halloween, is the date for the decision. There's going to be 2 votes, one on the merger, one on the compensation package for Core Scientific. We've talked about one of these key institutional investors, 2Cs. They've actually already submitted their gold proxy card for the vote and came across with a no or against on both topics.
Yeah, and we've been discussing this for quite some time now. Shareholders have now been given a date to vote by, and that date is the 29th of October, by 11:59 p.m. So you'll probably already start receiving the ability to vote through your exchanges where you have your shares held, or they might even send you an email to your email address if that's how you generally are communicated with when there's voting there. And there are 2 votes. There is the first vote to vote on the deal itself, and that's a straight yes or no. And the second vote is to vote on the package that was offered to the senior directors of the company. We've highlighted that on the podcast before. We looked at the CEO, the CFO, and the chief legal officer for the company there, and we showed that package on a previous podcast. We don't need to reiterate that again. And so 2 simple votes there. Now, looking at the position today, and bear in mind we've had this table since the announcement of that deal with CoreWeave that the directors of the company approved. That was done on the 7th of July, and it gave an assumption that the Core Scientific share price, if the CoreWeave deal was $165 at the time of agreement by shareholders, that would mean the Core Scientific share price would be around about $20.40 in terms of value, valuing the whole deal at $9 billion. Now, if we go fast forward to today, so, this is now a couple of months later, the CoreWeave share price is not $165, it's $124. The indicative value of the contract is $6.7 billion, not 9, and therefore the indicative price of Core Scientific shares, if that deal goes through today, there is $15.31. Now today's share price is $17.20 at the time of the podcast, so there is a premium out there on the Core Scientific share price. One of the reasons for that premium could be that there is an overwhelming support to vote out the deal. And obviously, if you vote out the deal, I'm assuming you vote out the package for the directors, because we know, we've covered the deal, that 590 megawatt deal. I mean, that's a significant deal. We've talked about TeraWulf, we've talked about Cypher, we've talked about other companies out there that have managed to sign a deal, Galaxy as well. This is the biggest deal out there, and that deal is already started to bring in revenues from May this year for Core Scientific. And yes, obviously the power ramp up will incur over this next year to 18 months. But once that deal's fully powered up and energized, that's bringing in around about $850 million a year for the next 12 years, and has 2 5-year extensions to that deal there. So a further 10 years, bringing in a lot more revenue over that period. And I think some of the shareholders are wondering, this deal for $9 billion doesn't really give it a lot of credibility, and also the fact that that deal was based on a floating CoreWeave share price, not on a fixed CoreWeave share price. So it will happen at the CoreWeave share price on the date of the agreement. And today, the CoreWeave share price is $40 less. So I can't see shareholders really getting enamored and wanting to vote that in today. Maybe CoreWeave have to come back to the table with more to offer the shareholders to incentivize them to vote it through, because it is down to shareholders now. And we know one of the biggest shareholders, as you've already articulated, Bryce, they've said no. And having spoken to a lot of shareholders at various conferences we've been to, they're not too enamored with that current position at the moment and are likely to vote no as well. So leave it down to yourselves. We just thought we'd highlight the bit of information that's come out there to give you the date now. So you've now effectively got 4 weeks or 30 days from today's date to get that vote in. Make your judgment and put your vote in there. I believe it's a simple majority, so I think over 50% majority will determine the action taken post the date itself.
Yeah, a lot of eyes on the CoreWeave share price over the next 30 days. Now, speaking of the next few days, we've only got a day and a half left in the Miner Madness 4.0 competition. You can see on the leaderboard here, we'll scroll through some of the leaders, a lot of movement. Top place now, Greg. First pick is Bitfarms, but a lot of different names across the list here. So a big congratulations to everyone who's participated. This is the 4th iteration of Miner Madness, and really some strong returns across the board.
Yeah, it's been a great competition. I think literally everyone's in profit. Look at the gains there. Greg's on my Telegram group there, so well done to Greg at the moment. Got a day and a half, but yeah, he's got a sizable lead there of about $26, and with a day and a half left, that might just be enough to get him through the post there. Bitfarms and Soluna have been really good, and Wolf itself, if you look at the Wolf share price heading towards $12 today, and bear in mind, I remember buying Wolf and it was 52 cents a share, not too many years ago. So that's had a fantastic run as well, and with the announcements it's had, so it justly deserves to be. So some really inspired picks this quarter. We'll determine whether we run another competition in the next few weeks and let everyone know the outcome of that.
We certainly will, and miners continuing to rally through the podcast. So a pleasant surprise to kick off the week. Let us know in the comment section below how you feel about the Core Scientific vote, and if you're holding shares of DMG, Hive, or Mara. With that being said, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.